Hello guys, today I'm gonna show you how to do this water particles effect. It's pretty much using physics 2D server and the visual server, and then I use a shader to get the actual final color to look the way it looks here. So let's start with the code. So what we're gonna do with the code is first we create a rigid body, then we create a sprite that follows the rigid body around and with its transform and all that. So here we have a reference to the texture that we're gonna use for each particle, and then the total amount. Then we have a counter just checking how much particles are in the scene for each generator. And then I have a spawn timer that just spawns them, after the time runs out. So it repeats really quickly. So I don't spawn everything at the same time or within one frame. And then I have a reference to track all the particles that are in the scene. So that's needed because of the way physics servers work. So with a physics server, you spawn stuff and they use something called RIDs. And those aren't added to the tree, so you can't really track them individual. Like you can't find them in the scene or anything. So they get an ID and you have to put them somewhere so you could go back to them later on if you want them, for anything. Which we do, since we're gonna be moving everything that a visual server creates. So with the visual server, we're gonna create each one of these an instance of the shape, the color, the texture, and we're gonna follow the physics server with the texture. So let's go down. So here I have a reference to each one. I'm just saying I want this to be the same as this, so I don't have to be rewriting it every time, rewriting this whole thing out. Now we create a transform, the initial position for both of them. So I set it to be the water gen's position, global transform. And then I set the origin to increment by a random value between -10 and 10 on each axis. Then we create the physics body. So it's a physics body that create, and this will be the RID for the physics body. And then now we could say set its mode rigid. Then we tell it to have a world, the world that is currently here in the scene, the physics world or the game world itself. Then we create a shape, so we use a circle shape for it. Then we set the shape data to be 8. Since it's a circle shape, we know that it only has a radius for the shape data, so that's just what it's gonna be here, and that's an RID in itself as well, but we don't need to track that for anything. And then for the body, we add that shape, so we get a reference to the RID, set the shape, and then set its transform to be 0. So this is the transform for the shape on the rigid body, and that's local, so it's just gonna be at 0 on the shape itself. Then we set the layer and mask. Yeah, you have to set those, so just set it to be 1 and 1. And then we start setting parameters. We set the friction, the mass, and the gravity scale. So I just set that to 2 just so it looks more, watery. I could increase it, but I'll leave it at 2 for now. Then the state, we tell it to be, we give it a its transform to be that transform that we created up here. Then now for the visual side, we use the visual shader, create a canvas item since we're in 2D. Then we say canvas item set parent to be this, the water gen. So you could check that if you want, and it says you get this returns the RID of this object. So everything in the scene also has an RID. Then we set its transform to be the water particle. The transform, same one that we created. Then the rect, we create a rectangle because we're gonna need this for the texture. Set its position. I set it to be offset by 8 since the size is 8 anyways. And then the size of it, is half the particle texture size. Then we can add the texture particle. Its texture, added it there, and then we modulate it to be pink. So the reason why we use pink is for the shader. That's gonna make us like, we can find that color in the scene and then change it to whatever we want to do. So I use pink because it's a rare color. You could just use any random color that you know you won't use anywhere else. I tried using a secondary camera, but there's no way in 2D for filtering what's rendered. That's in 3D though, but not in 2D. I don't know. I was tried finding something, but it's the only way I could get it to work. And then finally we pair these textures, these RIDs together to be one particle. So I append that particles array. So that's a 2D array. And I put a array inside of there with both the water collision and the particle collision. Then we, in physics process, we check the spawn timer. This is where I create the particles. And max count is less than max water particles. Then we create one particle. Then increase the count. And I have a globals that I'm just checking the total amount of that with all of these combined. So I'll increase that as well. The spawn timer, reset as the spawn time. And then here we change the texture's position in relation to the rigid body. So we get the transform. So here I have to actually type it out again since this was local up here. And then we get the state from the first index from that collision from the water particles, because we know that's the rigid body's index point. And we get its state, its transform. Then we have to decrement that by the global position because it's local. It doesn't track with the camera. It's a weird thing. I don't know why. I gotta figure it out. And then we set its transform to be that same transform. It's just a weird offset I have to set. Then down here we do deleting. So I pretty much check if they fall off screen or close to off screen. You can see when they get deleted. And then you have to free the RIDs. So both of them, then erase that reference to the boat so they don't get checked again. So it's gonna return an error. And then reduce total water particles. Alright. And then with that, now you could check up here. Let's go to visual. I'm gonna hide this area real quick so you could see what happens. There you go. We're generating a bunch of particles. Or, you know, could just call them little balls. Alright. So, let's close this down. We could go over here. Let's check out what this is doing now. Here's my shader that I created. Oops. Go here. So with the shader, I get a reference to some noise. That's for the water itself to, you know, that doesn't look just plain blue. Have a little randomness to it. And we have a water speed and color detect threshold. This is something I just created just so I could adjust. You'll see what I mean. Adjust like how much it detects the pink. So if it's a little bit off, it's not gonna cover all the pink. So I have this here. So this could be hard coded, but I just have it here. And then this is the water dev color. That's the pink that we gave it. So I set it to be the same in the shader. And then the main water color would be like, I set it to blue by default, RGB. Bubble colors, those other colors that you're seeing there. Just I set it to brighter blue, but I changed it in the editor itself. I make it glow a bit. If you have values over 1, they'll glow. Down here, you get a reference to the screen UVs with both of these. I didn't use this one, could just delete this. I was trying to have multiple bubble like randomness moving up, but it wasn't working out. So now we increment them by time and use sine and cosine. So sine for x, cosine for y. I'm not gonna explain those, but pretty much they make them swing back and forth. Same here, but at half speed or less than half speed on x. Down here we get a reference to the noise. So I'm using the same noise for both the bubbles, but then I use smooth step on the bubble noise. The BN is just short for bubble noise. So I set a smooth step. This gives a value. If anything's below 3.5, it makes it 0. If anything's above 8.3, it makes it 1. Anything in between gets passed through and it shows up at whatever color it is. Or like a blend between 3.5 and 8.3, I think. Still learning this part. With the screen texture now, we get the LODs, set the texture, and then set this to be 1.5. This blurs the entire all the the entire like texture, and then we check now if it's the depth color. Where are you? If I detect the depth color, that's the pink, I then set the new color to be the noise times the watercolor, and the bubble times the bubble color. And then right here now, this is for the bubble. So if it's above 5, we add the bubble color. Otherwise, it's just the regular color here. Else we set it to be fully transparent. Nothing will show otherwise. And then we finally set the color down here. And that should be it. Then we could run again with that enabled, get the full thing. I will leave the code on GitHub, but I wanted to add 3D since that's mostly what I do. So I'm gonna make this over again in 3D this time. I started already, but I'm not done. So thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe. See you in another video.